Good afternoon. The CFA Black Professionals Working Group is a relatively new group within the wealth of special interest groups we have here at the CFA UK. Via our events and networking opportunities, our goal is to connect 100 professionals who are interested in the topics that we speak about. We aim to provide a framework of support to diversity and inclusion initiatives that are already taking place across our industry, such as the Parker Review, which under the leadership of Lord Parker and the sponsorship of EY, amongst others, has been a driving force behind the increase in ethnic diversity at the UK board level. Back in 2020, just over half of the FTSE 100 companies had an ethnic minority board member. In 2021, that number had increased to 81. Next week, on March the 16th, we will hear the latest statistics. Now, one of the key motivating factors for this session today came from a data point that #TalkAboutBlack made prominent, that 1% of investment management professionals are Black, and that there were only 12 Black fund managers within the UK. That's out of 1,200 registered fund and asset management and wealth companies within the UK. Now, that statistic of 12 Black fund managers is a little bit old now, but if the data in the recent FT article that was published on December 28th, Race and Finance Asset Managers Fail to Walk the Walk, is correct, diversity within certain ranks in asset management has not increased much recently. However, our panel today is made up solely of that rare commodity. Our panel today is made up solely of Black fund and wealth managers. So we're here, we've been here, and now you're about to hear what we have to say. And I will hand over to Fola Anjorin, who is our host for the rest of this afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Natalie, for that beautiful introduction. As Natalie has mentioned, my name is Fola Anjorin, a member of the Black Professionals Working Group of the CFA UK. And we're very grateful to the CFA UK for giving us this opportunity to speak at this IDE event. As Natalie mentioned, our main area for discussion today is in reference to the Financial Times article of December 28, 2021, titled Race and Finance Asset Managers Fail to Walk the Walk. On our panel today, we have Caroline Harriott, who's a fund manager at Wesleyan, Justin Onuekwusi, the head of retail investment EMEA at Legal and General Investment Management, and Aneka, Beneby, a portfolio manager at Julius, Baer. They'll be talking about their experiences in the asset management industry, their progress and challenges, and the way forward. So this first question goes to each of you. And the question is, could you please give a brief summary of your background and how you chose asset management as a career path? And that goes to Caroline first.
Okay, hi, thanks Fola, thanks for the introduction. And Justin, thanks for joining us from the Black Professionals Group. I've come along this path in a very unconventional way. I am the youngest of 3 children, 2 older brothers who always used to beat me up and have fights with me, and that built up a bit of resilience. So I'm known as being a fighter, and I love to solve problems. I went to a normal Catholic school in West London. It was normal, but they didn't teach you much about careers. I do distinctly remember the careers officer saying to me, "Don't worry about your dreams of an accountant or a lawyer. I think you could be a nurse or a secretary." And with that, I did develop very good secretarial skills. And I kept temping as a secretary throughout my degree. And when I finished my degree, embarking on a career in economics, I believed I couldn't get a job, so I started temping in the city. So very much a graduate recruitment scheme, going to various banks and investment houses and different departments and learning what the city was all about. And without that, I would never have gained the experience to know what I wanted to do. I landed a job as an assistant at the Prudential. I was the assistant to 7 fund managers. And they helped me out. They showed me what they did, which was more than what my job was about. But there were ceilings at the Pru that I couldn't progress further. So I left there and I went to work at Cavendish as an analyst and a fund manager. And I was there for 20 years and it was brilliant. It was fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed what I did. I left there. I started up a consultancy for a couple of years, took a break, and then I'm now at Wesleyan managing funds. So it's a very unconventional route, but I got there in the end.
Fantastic.
And that route, but it worked.
Fantastic. And Justine, if you can tell us a little bit about your background. I think you're on mute. We can't hear you yet.
Do you want me to jump in, Fola?
Yes, please, Aneka. Please go ahead.
All right. While we wait for Justin, I'll just jump in here. So I'm Aneka. I have a slightly different background to everyone else on the call. I was actually born and raised in the Bahamas. It's a small island nation of about 400,000 people. And that's where really I was educated. I went to university in Canada, studied economics and French, and wanted to go back to the Bahamas to work. And there are very few industries where I could put that degree to work. And so I ended up in banking. I worked for a French bank, BNP Paribas, where I started out as the assistant to the CEO. And it was really here that I was introduced to stocks and bonds and private clients, really by happenstance that I ended up where in the industry and absolutely loved it. And so 2.5 years ago, I was given the opportunity to fulfill a professional dream by coming to the UK and working as a portfolio manager for Julius Baer. Just an interesting vantage point that I have is that I grew up really seeing Black people, Black professionals thriving in leadership positions across all sectors of society. And so I'm very excited and interested to have this conversation from that vantage point.
Thank you, Aneka. I really identify with that because I spent 12 of my formative years in Nigeria as well. And so, yeah, I was exposed to a lot of Black leaders too. Justine, I hope we can hear you now. Hi, Justine. No, we can't hear you yet. Okay, I think while we wait for we can't hear you yet. Okay, we'll come back to Justine. So my next question is to Caroline. So in the FT article, there's a reference to how asset managers are now signaling the importance of ethnic diversity alongside gender. Would you like to share your thoughts on what you see as benefits that diversity brings to the industry and how having a higher representation of Black asset managers can add value?
I think when it comes to portfolio management, the number one rule is to diversify. And that's for a myriad of reasons, to reduce risk and so forth. And in our industry, we should adopt the same principle. We should diversify. And I'm not just talking about Black, although this is the Black professional group, is diversifying across all groups. Because when you diversify, you get an input of different perspectives, different ideas, and that results in a different view on life and a different way of solving problems. And I feel that the investment management industry, I mean, many a time over the 25 years that I worked, you will go in a room and I'll be the sole Black female. And I'm very, very comforted, I must say, at the International Women's Day, when I went to an event on Tuesday, and that has not been the case. The numbers are increasing. So the industry has taken note, and the numbers are increasing. And I think as a result of that, you will see greater profitability, and you will get better engagement of employees. And that's what comes with a diverse workforce. So that's my belief. You need to diversify to solve different problems and to have a better working practice.
That sounds great. And I suppose that would also motivate executives and top management to stay engaged in a culture of inclusivity. And that leads on to my next question, which is to Aneka. So how do you think top executives in asset or portfolio management can remain motivated, especially with underrepresented groups such as the Black community?
Thanks, Fola. I'm a firm believer that organizational culture, values, norms, these things come from the top. They are strongest when they come from the top. And it's crucial to keep top executives driving this effort forward. So first, I would say, encouraging employees from minority backgrounds to share their stories in safe spaces, to be honest about their journeys, in forums that are non-judgmental. That's really important. Yesterday, I actually had the opportunity to do this at our International Women's Day forum at Julius Baer. I was quite open and honest about what my journey was. And I think it was beneficial to the entire staff because a lot of them just don't know what some of the struggles are. So it twofold is the importance of this. First is that, talking about race and talking about these issues make us more comfortable doing that, but also creates a better understanding on a human level. And so well-meaning employees then I think will feel motivated to push inclusivity forward once these stories are heard and understood. I think once the conversations have been had, top executives get to a point where they're like, okay, well, what do we do next? What now? And I don't think this effort should be put on minority employees. Oftentimes we have day-to-day jobs and we're exhausted. And so investing in external help, investing in specialists and experts to put in place a framework to drive inclusivity forward, I think would help. And then finally, I think accountability is really, really important. Make D&I part of the organizational strategy. The strategy these top executives are responsible for. Link it to their evaluation and to compensation. I think this is a big motivating factor, simply linking to compensation efforts on diversity and inclusion generally.
Fantastic. So back to you, Justine. Could you please give us a brief summary of your background and how you chose fund management as a career path?
Yeah, you can hear me now, yeah?
Yes, we can.
You know something. My iPad, it's like to connect to some other microphone somewhere else in this building, so somebody else could hear me on the floor, I think. My background. So I grew up in Manchester, single parent family with my younger brother, and something. Late 80s, early 90s, times were often quite hard. My mum worked extremely hard to make sure that we had everything that we needed. She was a teacher, so she instilled in me the value of education, which is really important. And how did I get to the asset management industry? Well, I didn't know about the asset management industry when I was growing up. I actually wanted to be a doctor at first, and I realised when I got to my teenage years, I didn't like blood. So I was like, okay, better not do that. And then I wanted to be a lawyer. It's the standard professions that people choose. But then I worked year 10, I worked in the Manchester County Court, and it was the dullest thing I've ever done in my life. So I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. So I thought, let me focus on my numbers, because I've always been at maths. And then more and more, as I kind of researched careers, the actuarial profession stood out to me as a career that I'd want to go into, because I could use my numbers. So I did an economics degree. I applied like crazy, 60, 70 applications, eventually got a job at Aon Consulting as an actuarial pension consultant, understanding liabilities of pension schemes. And actually, I realised, this dream job that I wanted wasn't the dream at all. And so very luckily, as part of that graduate scheme, one of the training sessions was investment consulting. So in that investment consulting training scheme, I realised when I was talking about markets, equities, bonds, commodities, asset classes, that actually this is where I wanted to be. This is where my passion lies. So I went and knocked on the door of the head of investment consulting, said, look, I've been working here for 6 months, don't really like it. I want to join investment consulting. Within a month, I was sat on that investment consulting floor, working, dropped the actuarial exams, did CFA. I've never really looked back in terms of investing. And I suppose the pinnacle of, I think anyway, you might not think so, but the pinnacle of an investment career to me is to actually manage money. And that was something that I strive to do as soon as really got into investing, or it's to run your own investment business. I haven't run my own investment business yet, but I have run money. Running my investment business is probably something that's in the future. But actually, I've got to say, my new role, head of retail investment, actually is overseeing the whole of the retail investment business. So it is exactly that.
Okay. So very diverse backgrounds from each of you, but you are all doing very, very well in your respective roles. So to obtain benefits of diversity, we are what we're saying is that organizations have to be more proactive in cultivating a culture of inclusivity and removing barriers. And this next question is on promotion. Each of you are in senior levels in your respective roles. However, there is anecdotal evidence that suggests that Black professionals in financial services stay in junior positions longer than necessary and sometimes have to switch jobs to get promotions. And I think Caroline attested to a ceiling when she was at the Pru. So Justin, could you describe how you think organizations can empower Black people to seek promotion?
Yeah, so I think there's you've got to think of why this happens, and I think there are certain structural barriers that prevent Black people from progressing in workplace. I think number one is a lack of role models. So and there's lots of studies that show that role models, the first thing people look for is people that look like them. And then after that is people that have similar backgrounds, etc., to them. And I think that's really important. Secondly, I'd say it's a lack of sponsorship. And part of that is that when it comes to networking, people tend to network again with people that look like them first and foremost. And that's why, you tend to find, you tend to find that people who are very different from the majority have this kind of lack of belonging. And then thirdly is these invisible structures that stop, that provide hurdles to stop people from progressing. So what can companies do? I think firstly to stop to look at this lack of role models. I think companies need to break down their company barriers and actually look to collaborate and work together with other companies on this, because actually, ultimately, even if a company's doing well, the likelihood of them having a lot of Black people, a lot of ethnic minorities in their senior C-suite is actually very rare. And so therefore, by combining with other companies and showing and presenting role models that are elsewhere that have made it to the C-suite, I think that will really help. And I think things like the diversity projects, this network, help to do that. It's kind of cross collaboration across company lines. I think in terms of sponsorship, I think companies do this really badly. But I do think that you really have to support your talent to help them to progress when they're not in the room. is vitally important. There's a big difference between sponsorship and mentorship. I've been very lucky that everywhere I've been, I've had really strong sponsors who back me, and that's vitally important. And the last thing I would say companies need to do is actually recognise some of these invisible barriers, and of just some of them, which they may seem like little things, but actually when they add up, it just means that a black person or an ethnic minority, it's a lot harder. So a great example is coaching panels. I've spoken to a number of people who are at the level where they're starting to they want to find a coach. But businesses have these coaching panels with their preferred suppliers. And typically, there are a very low number of ethnic minorities on there. So it's very tiring to every time you start a coaching conversation, try and explain what it's like to be the only person in the room. So actually having more ethnic diversity on those coaching panels, I think is really important. The last one I'm going to touch on, because I know I've gone on for far too long, is around leadership. And the leadership programs that companies tend to have, they don't touch on identity. And identity is really important. So this is why black leadership programs and specialized leadership programs for specialist diverse talent are actually really important, because embracing your identity allows you to be confident in the workplace. And I think, again, a lot of companies do not recognize that. And that is really important if we're going to move the dial on this.
Okay. Yeah. And I suppose when we talk about sponsors and mentors, we're talking about having allies in the workplace. And that brings me on to my next question, which is to you, which is Caroline. So, is there a difference between an ally and someone you just have a good professional relationship with, or do you perceive benefits of having allies for underrepresented groups?
Thanks, Fola. I think I could just leave to do the rest. Just so well. For the years that I worked, I didn't have many allies, and I was the only person in the room for the majority of my career. So it's very difficult for me to talk about this. So please jump in, either of you, if you feel. But for me, an ally is somebody, regardless of race, and they don't see your race, but they're happy to help you along your way. And that's with genuine happiness to see the potential in you and push you forward. That's what I define as an ally. And a work colleague is someone who you can have general chats about the sunshine, about the weekend, and makes your working day good. You need to have friends at work and so forth. But allies and sponsors are something that is crucial for you to progress in your career. And without that, and without somebody knowing you and giving you the power to progress, you'll be stuck in that job, in that particular job, for much, much longer than you need to be. So I don't know. As I say, that's just from my experience. I don't know if the others agree with me.
Sure.
I'm conscious. I'm conscious. I don't want to talk.
Go on, Justin. Please go ahead.
I completely agree with that. I think one of the big challenges is that people who claim to be allies think it's an identity. They think it's a noun, but allyship is a verb, right? You've got to do something. There's got to be an action. Otherwise, you're not an ally. So I would just, and also it's not down to and it's something that Aneka said, actually, it's not down to the individual. It's not down to the diverse individual to say, this is how you need to be an ally. Actually, post George Floyd, we all had so many people come into us saying, actually, what can I do? What can I, and I got overwhelmed by it, to be honest with you. But actually, there are lots of things, lots of resources out there which say how to be an ally. Actually, go and it's almost, you have to tap into those resources yourself and work out what type of ally you want to be.
Thank you. Thanks, Justine. So, Aneka, following on from Justine's response, how can someone who wants to be an ally for underrepresented groups go about doing that? What does good allyship look like?
Yeah, let me first say that anyone, right, can be an ally, whether you manage people, whether you're a colleague or a subordinate. Just want to say that. look, just being kind, human, empathetic, these things go a long way. But I think specifically, not making assumptions around what someone's ambition is, right? A minority who, might be your subordinate. Really have a conversation, get to know what that person wants to achieve, and don't stop there. Provide the opportunities to allow that, put them in challenging positions on challenging projects, give them the opportunity to shine and maybe show other people, dispel any misconceptions that may be had about that person, but also giving that person the confidence to do what it is that they need to do to progress their own career. I think being generous with your network is really, really important as well. One point that I will mention is driving intentional inclusion. And what I mean by that is if you're organizing an activity, let's say you organize golf, maybe be aware that that's not something that everyone does or even has the means to do. And we know during some of these activities that important conversations happen, right? And there's an exclusion that exists there. Maybe also put aside some time to have that very same conversation with the people who weren't able to make that activity or have a more inclusive activity in the first place. One thing that resonates with me is calling out bad behavior publicly and in the moment. I had an experience where a colleague was extremely rude to me on a conference call of about 20 people. And once the call ended, I went to the powers that be, let's say. And I said, I really didn't appreciate that. And I was assured, we pulled that person aside and we had a conversation with him about it. But I would have much preferred for that, colleague to be admonished there and then, just to let everyone know that that type of behavior is completely unacceptable. And then the final thing that I would say on this point of being a good ally is to be a mentor, be a sponsor, be an advocate. And Carolyn and Justin, I think, described what that looks like quite well.
Thank you. Thank you, Aneka. Okay, so going back to the Financial Times report, there is a mention of a lack of data, and that is cited as a reason for reduced inclusivity and diversity in the workplace. So, Justin, how do you think sourcing and availability of data can improve? So, say, for example, I was asked to complete a form recently on an application form where there was a diversity form. And in quite a few of those questions, I chose prefer not to answer. So I suppose maybe actions like that are not helping in terms of the data sourcing and the data availability issue. So how do we encourage people to feel comfortable with providing such data?
No, you're not helping at all. No, no, that's actually, I've got to say, filling out these forms and saying do not disclose, don't want to disclose, that actually isn't. That I don't think that's a challenge, because the challenge is that essentially people just aren't filling in these things, and companies, I think, have a duty to understand the people within their business if they want to create the right culture for the people in their business. So I think it's a failure of companies that they haven't been able to do this. So yeah, there is a drive to get more data, and I think that will happen. But I think there's three things that need to really happen to really kind of turn the screw. First of all, clients need to come out and say they want this data. I think the growth of ESG, and particularly the growth of the S, is going to become more and more important. And I think clients are going to demand that asset managers in particular show the data of the people that are running their money. You've seen it with the asset owner charter on the institutional side. You've seen it with City High's Act framework. This is going to become more and more common. So that's the first one, the client side. The second thing is the government. The government has been talking kind of on and off about making it compulsory for large companies to collect ethnicity data, really to drive the ethnicity pay gap data that they've been speaking about. That might not happen, and to be honest with you, it's been on the back burner with kind of everything that's happened politically over the last few years. Will that occur? I don't know, but clearly there are people, including Legal and General, who are speaking to the government on these issues. And I think the last one is the regulator. And we've seen the regulator come out with a discussion paper where data was fundamental to that, or fundamental to try and understand your business. It was the PRA, the FCA, and the Bank of England to all financial institutions. So I think I went to Catholic school as well. So almost the holy trinity, I shouldn't say that, just blasphemy, but the holy trinity of the regulator, the government, and the clients, I think, are vitally important to really move the dial on this. The last thing I'd say, and it is the very last thing, is I think it's again a failure of companies who say that we don't know the make of our business, therefore we can't make any decisions on increasing ethnicity. All you need to do is look around your boardroom and look around your senior leadership team, and you can see whether you've got a challenge in terms of a lack of ethnicity in your boardroom or in your senior leadership. And the one thing it does not do, if you can't collect quantitative data, you can collect qualitative data. You can assess the temperature of what ethnic minorities and Black people in particular are going through in your business.
Thank you for that very comprehensive response. Okay, so Aneka, what are your thoughts on the future? Do you think there will be sustained and increased momentum for better representation?
Thanks, Fola. The fact that we are here having this conversation in this forum makes me very hopeful about the future. Up until very recently, I don't think, we were having these kinds of conversations. But, that said, we do have some way to go. And so allies and the underrepresented alike, I think we need to continue to have these kinds of conversations, though they're not easy. We need to have them in our homes, in our workplaces, in the industry, and indeed, as Justin mentioned, at the national level. Justin also touched on a point that I wanted to touch on, ESG, which, is becoming more and more mainstream. I think we talk a lot about the E and the G, but it would be nonsensical to leave out the S, right? And that's where this effort comes in. And then finally, I think that companies that are slow to have better representation and more diversity are going to be hurt, right? Not just their reputations, but also their performance. I think that diverse talent will leave these companies for places that are more progressive, and that they'll probably have issues as well retaining the minority talent or the diverse talent that they do have. And so I think in the future, there might be a self-correcting mechanism where these companies get on board simply because they don't want to be left behind. And so for those three reasons, I would say there are some structural tailwinds for the sustained momentum of this movement. So I'm quite hopeful, Fola.
That sounds very great. That sounds great. And Caroline, what advice would you give a professional just starting out in their career or mid-level who is pursuing a career in asset management?
Brilliant. No, I just would like to touch on what Aneka and Justin said. What's happening is not a story of today. And all the initiatives, like the 100 Black interns and so forth, they are going to work, but it will take time. And as I say, the event I went to earlier this week, it was so comforting to see that change is happening. So I'm very, very happy. But, going into this industry is hard. It's very competitive. And you've got to bring your A game. And I hear often people say, don't work hard, work smarter. Yes, I agree with that. But I think you have to do both. You have to work hard, find efficient ways to do things to shine. You have to be willing to do things and not just have an attitude of, no, that's not for me. Things, as Justin said, he tried different things, and some work for you, some don't. And until you find that job that you can shine in, just keep trying different things. I think you have to network. One of the things that I didn't do very well, feeling alone, I didn't network. I'm always at the back of the class. I always like to sit in the back and, go to a pub. Oh, no, it's okay. But now in this modern world, you don't need to go to a pub. You can join networks and, do it remotely if you feel uncomfortable. But it is very, very important to try and network as much as possible. And ultimately, if you feel you're not succeeding, you've got to try to move somewhere else. And don't be afraid to move somewhere else. But do try in that job and put your A game forward. And you will get on. I do believe in the saying that cream rises to the top. And if you're doing what you can do to the best of your ability, if one place doesn't recognize it, somewhere else will. But that's my best advice.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Caroline. And finally to Justin. So I think a couple of years back, you were awarded the Freedom of the City of London amongst many awards that you have. And in the light of that, could you talk about some of the initiatives that you have been involved in? Being awarded the Freedom of the City of London was in recognition of your work in promoting diversity and inclusion. So if you could talk about some of the initiatives you've been involved in and what are the most important next steps in improving diversity?
Yeah, I can talk a little about that. I think just what Caroline said around working smart versus working hard. I always say that actually working hard on those softer skills is really important, that the building meaningful relationships. I think that is almost a key to promotion and navigating the industry, because once you have really good relationships, you have mentors, maybe not sponsors, but you have mentors that can guide you and help you. Really, really important from there. So people talk about working smart. I just think it's actually working hard in the right areas. But anyway, spot on. So initiatives, clearly I co-founded Talk About Black with a number of other people, and that movement I think has helped to create a really change in the narrative in the investment industry. I get often asked to go and do talks at leadership boards and so on and so forth at different asset managers, and that seems to be really. As part of Talk About Black, I founded the N Circle Mentoring Circles. And these are monthly mentoring circles where we get senior, typically black talent, black role models on one side of the table, and we get mentors at the other side, mentees at the other side of the table. Typically we're getting 30 people a month. And the next one's on managing money, where we've got 2 financial advisors who have got to the top of their game, really talking about or helping people to cut through the difference between ISAs and SIPs and really helping them to manage their money, which I think is really, really, really important. I've been involved on the BITC race leadership board and the race and work charter. I think it's vitally important. I think that's really the foundation of any business. If they're serious about tackling diversity, signing up to the race at work charter or at least the principles of the race at work charter, vitally important. If you don't sign the principles, are really, really important. I think I'll kind of stop there in terms of initiatives, because there's lots more like after school programs, and I've been a little bit involved in 10,000 black interns. LGIM took on 17 black interns. We'll take on 1. We took on 17. So these are embracing these initiatives and executing well. But I think the next steps for me is around data, and this is why the Talk About Black and the Race and Ethnicity Network are launching this 90% campaign. And the idea is we're going to ask companies to sign up to get their data to 90%. So that includes people like you, Fola, who say that they're not going to disclose, but actually the coverage needs to be 90%. And that's what companies, we think, should be aspiring to. They might not get there, but actually if they're aspiring to it and they're trying to get there, I think that's vitally important, because the only way I think that we move on is if companies get a real understanding of the people that they work with. It's great to have a great understanding of your client base and say, okay, we're working with this suite of clients, and I want to understand them. But actually, how can you do that when you don't even understand your own people? So that's vitally important, and I think this campaign hopefully will be big, and it'll make a difference in terms of being a dial mover in the industry.
Fantastic. Thank you all very much. We're almost out of time. You've been a great inspiration to me this afternoon, and I'm sure you're a great inspiration to many other people out there. I'll hand you back to Natalie, to close the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Fola. I agree. That was a fantastic session. We learned a lot today. It's 90% campaign, Justin, sounds fantastic. And I do agree. And I think a lot of companies are waking up to this, that data is key. So we've all found that, Fola is probably the one that's not answering all the questions in the forms. But hopefully now, after we've had this discussion, we can all understand how important it is. As Justin's mentioned, we spend so much time as employees, as client leaders, as investors, getting to know firms, getting to know companies, but we really need to understand ourselves. We really need to understand our own company, our own people, to be able to find a way forward. So I hope we gave you some things to think about today and some actions. Allyship, remember, it's not a noun, it's a verb. Get to know your people. And as James Baldwin said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but you can't change anything if you don't face it. So hopefully we've given you some positivity to take away from today.